Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number 115 of IABC's Circle of Fellows. I'm Shel Holtz. I am Senior Director of Communications at Webcor. We're a commercial contractor in California, headquartered in San Francisco, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Concord, California. And I am delighted to be moderating this panel discussion among IABC Fellows. That's the International Association of Business Communicators. And today we are going to be talking about making that transition from communication practice to academia. And all four of the fellows on the panel today have made this transition or partly made this transition. Three of our panelists are here. One professor is late. I assume that Mr. Clemens will be joining us lately, but I'm going to ask the three of you who were on time to introduce yourselves. Let's go around clockwise as I see you on my screen, starting with you, Cindy.
Oh, thanks, Shel. I'm Cindy Schmieg. I'm coming to you from the Phoenix area where it is darn hot. And it will continue to be so for a while. I've had about 30 years of global corporate communications work before I started teaching. And I started teaching, face-to-face at a public for-profit school. Then I went to a private not-for-profit school, and now I'm teaching online completely. So it's been a really interesting experience, and I'm looking forward to telling you a bit about it.
I'm looking forward to hearing it. Mark, how about you?
Hey there, Mark Schumann. I'm connecting today from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And after too many years that I've lost count of, I started teaching about 10 years ago. First, teaching communications in a small college in Connecticut. And then I was hired to rethink the communications curriculum for the MBA program at Baruch College in New York City. And then for the last 5 years, I've been on the faculty at NYU, where I teach in the master's program in executive coaching and organizational consulting. And then I also teach in the the coaching program at Columbia. And I still coach. And so I do both. I actively coach by day and teach by night. And tonight's the first evening of my class. And so I can't wait to learn from my colleagues today.
Outstanding. And Jennifer.
Hi, everyone from the Vancouver area, where I hope some of you will be joining us in less than a month for IABC World Conference. Super excited to host the world, for Canada to welcome the world to this year's World Conference. I'm a relative newbie compared to all of you to the world of teaching. I certainly did. I led workshops and did training for clients and things along those lines. But just as we were in COVID, I got a wonderful opportunity through an IABC colleague to join as an adjunct professor at the UBC Sauder School of Business. So what I love most is teaching first and third year business students communications, which is, by the way, a required course before they graduate, which is even better. And I'm really looking forward to talking about the overlap between the storytelling consulting that I continue to do and teaching, both of which I feel fuel each other in powerful ways.
Looking forward to hearing about that. For those of you who are watching live in real time, please feel free to join the conversation. You're using YouTube Live, and if you click that chat button, you'll be able to share your questions, your observations, your experiences with us and become part of that conversation. So looking forward to having you join in with us. My teaching experience is limited. Several years ago, I taught a couple of programs for university extension. And then I taught a class for a private college here in San Francisco. And it was not a great experience. I did not re-up after one semester. So I'm curious to hear what you like about it, but I'm more curious initially to hear your transition story. What were you doing before you moved to teaching? What motivated the change? And how did you get that very first gig? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go.
Oh, you go, Cindy.
Well,
You
I
go.
go first because my story is probably the most dated. I was consulting when I made the move, and I really wanted to share my expertise, all the things that I'd learned about. But I also thought, wow, that would be a nice way to add some extra steady income to my consulting career income that wasn't very steady. So I started teaching at a for-profit college. It was a dreadful experience, but I stayed for 3 or 4 years until they closed the school. So, but for really, because I just thought I had something to share.
No, I would say the same. And it wasn't a career change; it was a career addition or a career enhancement. I was curious. I think it was out of curiosity. How would I like this? And that first gig totally came from an IABC fellow, Barb Puffer, who was in Connecticut. And I told her one day, I would really like to teach someday. And she said, well, I happen to know someone who's looking for a teacher. Let's have lunch. And so I owe it all to Barb. And that I was scared to death. And I loved the sense of being scared. And after 150 years working, I was really glad to get the willies and what will I do? And will they? I just thought that whole thing. And that's what I love about teaching. I have new class tonight. I love the first day of school uncertainty.
I still get the butterflies literally pretty much every time I walk into the class. Because it's such an unpredictable landscape, Mark. And I love what you said, that you love the sense of scared, and it keeps us on our toes. Yeah, I like I said, I've always loved being in a learning environment. So I've really gravitated towards some workshops and some facilitating and those kinds of situations over my career. I did some executive leadership training through Royal Roads in Victoria several years ago. And then when this opportunity came around, a silver lining to COVID for me, because there were at the time instructors who were leaving positions because they didn't want to teach online. So Cindy, they needed you as a coach. And my first term I taught online and didn't like it much at all. I'm sure I could get used to it with some coaching from experts, but I really just get a thrill out of the in-person experience. I'll add that my kids are around the same age as the kids I teach. And so I think that it was a bit of a really wanting to immerse myself in that age and stage of life. My kids are older now, but I still love tapping into that faucet of hopefulness, of confusion, of the sense of scared for what's coming. And so it's been like you, Mark, and Cindy, I think you as well, to a certain degree. I added teaching to what I was doing already, and I now do both. I do both 3/4 time.
Yep.
We do have a comment from our friend Brian Kilgore, who's been on the advisory boards of the PR courses at Humber College, Centennial College, Ryerson University, the University of Toronto Night School, but never week after week for money.
Well, and I wouldn't maybe put the emphasis on for money, because the return to this experience is what we get from the students. And one of the things I do in my classes, and in NYU, my classes are all virtual, and I absolutely love teaching in the virtual environment. One of the things I do is I have students after every week record a 2-minute video of their reflections and learnings from that week's session. The joy that comes from getting to experience these moments of discovery, that's the payback. And I think it's that willingness to challenge people in a way so they have those moments in the same way each of us can point to people along the road who help challenge us. That's the thrill. That never gets old.
Right. Mark, I completely agree with you. The money's not great, but those moments when you can see a student got it and really, move their work forward because of the class, that's the amazing reward.
Yeah, that is.
So just thinking about our audience and what they might be listening to learn from us, agree. The money is sort of in the mid-level of what it's certainly less than I would earn consulting and less than most of us would earn in a full-time job that corresponds with our levels of experience. However, just to underscore what you said, Cindy, it is a steady income, and in consulting, that's a nice thing to have. It's also a steady schedule, which I really like. Some structure around my day and my week. So those are some advantages from my perspective, in addition to what you've described, that thrill that comes, and again, growing the network. Our network goes in all directions, including with 20 somethings who may someday be in a position to be in a position to be a different part of our network.
Yeah, I love that.
When I was in journalism school, we had one professor who taught public relations, and he was a professor. I mean, he came up through academia. He had never worked in an agency or as a professional communicator. And it seems, as I talk to people who do teach, I'm thinking of people like Jen Floto at the Annenberg School and the like, that this is pretty common, that a lot of the professors who are teaching communications are academics through and through. What do we bring to the table as practitioners coming into that world?
Real life. This is for all of you who may not have seen Jennifer's post on LinkedIn. It is all about real life. What I love about the combination of working as a coach and then teaching, coaching, and consulting is I can bring what happened today into the classroom that evening. So when I go to class this evening, I'll actually bring to class some of the conversations I've had today, because I want us to work with current material, not an academician's view of what the material should be. So I really veer toward the practical and wanting people to be in the moment and work with the moment. I trust the academics' view of what the theory and thinking is behind what we do, but there's nothing like dealing with what we really face every day, because we face it and they can learn from how they would face it.
I love to. I'll add to that, Mark. Again, like you, like both of you, I work with some very, very accomplished academics, and I put them way high up on a pedestal. They are unbelievably smart and stay on the top of their game in terms of understanding the theory and the learning and the research behind communication and related fields. One of the reasons I love that the schools that have in as they do in my case, both full-time teaching staff, professors, and adjuncts like me who bring a practical experience, is that students, like all of us, learn in different ways. So when my colleague Deo and I share a deck of slides, his is almost 100% theory. And I learned so much from reading. We're teaching the same topic, and mine is filled with real life experiences. And I like that a school is able to offer both of those learning environments and those learning contexts to students who might gravitate toward one or the other. I learn every day from my colleagues and from the more active research they do than I do theoretically. Yeah. So
what I love about that, Jennifer, is I think this is the ultimate team sport. And I have at NYU, I have my buddy who coincidentally is someone I've worked with for 30 years. And she teaches the process side of coaching and consulting very thoroughly. And I'm more the art of coaching and consulting. And we looked at these two dimensions of the student experience together and in balance. And what I love about that is it's a chance for our students to discover that there is a science to what we do, and there is an art that we experience through all the choices we make in a conversation. I love the balance. I love the team sport.
That's a really good point, Mark. And you started off with that word about reality. I think that's really what we bring, because there's so much theory and existing concepts, but to be able to use those in the real world, that's what we bring.
Yeah.
Focusing our students on how they can use those things in the real world. I think the other thing about that, that when you get to the real world, you have to be able to think strategically. And for IABC people, strategic communication planning is in our blood. And it's easy to apply those techniques to how students can get the materials from the classroom and take those out into the real world. And once you get to the real world, if you're not being strategic, it's very difficult to succeed as a business leader.
100%, Cindy. That the principles of audience, purpose, channel, message, measurement, all of those things, again, go both ways, right? Us taking those into the classroom. I mean, I use that as an example to my students when I'm teaching those principles. I tell them, I think about you as my audience and how I'm going to make this, how I can make these messages resonate for you. And then vice versa, giving them those principles to then go out into, in their cases, again, one of the reasons I'm so thrilled that a business school has a required business communications course is many of them will go into finance and accounting and operations and logistics. But to be able to take those principles of good communications, which will apply in any position, I think is a powerful tool.
Yes.
And Mr. Clemens has joined the party. Hi, John.
How are you? I got the time thing all confused. On
Well.
It says 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm thinking, okay, I'll be on there at 4 o'clock.
John, did the dog eat your homework?
Oh my gosh. That's my mind.
Or I used to always laugh when I was at Baruch. I could always tell when someone wrote their presentation on the subway, because there's just something about subway think that they bring right into the classroom. And it was on a little piece of paper they kept having to, move around.
John, since you've been able to join us, and I'm thrilled that you were, we'll step back to the beginning of the stream and have you introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Clemens, and I am a public relations and communications consultant, and I am an adjunct professor at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, as well as Loyola University in New Orleans. And I have some 30 years of corporate PR experience in all areas of the field, and it's good to be with everybody now.
And continuing the conversation that we had just started, another communicator who made the jump to academia, the late Keith Sheldon, who had been at Southern California Edison for years and years, ended up teaching. And one of the things that he told me that he found frustrating was how slow curriculum was to be changed officially. And as we talk about bringing our real world experience into the classroom, is that real world experience ever in conflict with the approved curricula? How do you deal with that?
So I got to live through this and within the requirements of the state of New York. And we wanted, much as Jennifer's describing, we wanted the communication curriculum at Baruch, which is a public university, to be relevant for people to get their MBAs and go out and get jobs, and the importance of communication skills. And when you rework a curriculum, you have to live within the academic requirements. And what I found was fascinating is if you take to heart the learning objectives that have been set for the program over time, and then we search through our archive, and many times that archive involves conversations with each other about what did you experience that helped you with this, and what did you experience that helped you with that, and you use the real life examples to support the learning objectives. That actually, in my case, was well received by the state of New York and their rigorous curriculum process, because they saw their objectives, which they had so carefully thought through, actually come to life. So that was a case of it took a village, and I reached out to many people. I think I reached out to 50 to 60 of our IABC colleagues all those years ago to ask our community, what is it that a graduating MBA needs to bring to an organization? And those real examples, and they gave me real specifics, gave depth to the curriculum we were trying to change.
In my situation, I'm teaching undergraduate students, and at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, they laid out some basic parameters of what needed to be taught. But to Mark's point, my real world experience complemented what they wanted these students to know. Some basics such as how to write a news release, how to do an organizational announcement, putting together a strategic plan, crisis communications, developing a e-portfolio for the work that they were producing in my class and others. But they gave me liberty on that. I have a textbook that I've been using for the past 6 years. It was recently updated, and I plan to use the updated version because there were several items in the textbook that were outdated. I didn't even teach them. But I had a bit more freedom in terms of what I could teach and the resources I could use.
And my experience is quite different because I'm teaching graduate students online. And the school, I teach for Southern New Hampshire University. They provide the textbook, the reading and resource assignments, the assignments, and I do the grading and provide enough other materials to students to try to bring that information that's provided into what is the real world. And the process to update those classes is a bit cumbersome because all the materials never get updated at the same time. So there are some out-of-date materials. And I guess that's what I contribute to it is by putting together weekly announcements and videos and things that help the students find better resources or more up-to-date resources. And then just take the little bits of lessons that are in the materials provided so that they can move forward with them.
Yeah, and I'm more in a situation similar to John, where I'm given academic freedom to bring my experience to the classroom within the learning objectives that have been set. I have never found a more generous team of professionals, and I've worked with some very generous teams of professionals. But my teaching colleagues from the start have just been extremely open in sharing with me their experiences and content, and also listening and asking for my input. So, for example, one of the major assignments, as sort of a midterm assignment that we do, is a series of is communication responses based on a series of mini case studies or scenarios. And I've been involved a few times in drafting those, again, offering a bit of an external kind of reality check on what that might look like in real life. I would say the curriculum, from my perspective, very much reflects my current and my current experience. From a resource perspective, I'm also able to bring. There is one assigned textbook for my third year class, or reading rather, and that is actually a book on First Nations history in Canada, which underpins learnings that we do in the classroom related to development and economic opportunities within the First Nations landscape in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. In addition to that, I include as recommended reading the IABC publication that is such a great resource with case studies and all sorts of things. And even though the students are not in communications, several have told me they found it an excellent resource for them once they got into the workforce.
So to your question, Shell, it really varies with the institution that you're teaching for. It's vast in terms of the freedom you have, what's required, the elements included. I think it's just different for anyone who's looking at teaching. It depends on that institution that you work for.
And to satisfy those learning objectives. But also, what's fabulous about this enhancement to our careers, if we have the chance, is it's the opportunity for us to do some, I think, careful curating of things we have done over the years, and opening those up for perhaps it could have been done better. And one of the things I do in my classes all the time is I take a case, even some that might have been well thought of by the Gold Quill people at one point, and I say, here's what we did. How could it have been better? And I think I got the inspiration from a food show. But how could we have cooked this better? What could have been done? What did we forget? Take it apart and give me a better, deconstruct it and come back with a better version of what could have been done. They love that. First of all, it's great fun to redo the teacher's work, but it's also an opportunity for them to take something that was real and with the benefit of time say, why didn't you think about this? And why didn't you think about that? They love that. And I do that with current things too. I take, this is what happened today. So sometimes I think we're at our best as teachers when we bring in our own curiosity and we almost let that create a sense of discovery that we experience together.
You all are teaching the next generation of communicators. I'm curious what you're learning about this generation, what you think they're going to bring to the profession. But also, one of the issues that I keep hearing about in conversations about AI, and a leader at LinkedIn just made this point very overtly, and that is that a lot of the work that they're asking their people to use AI to do is work that used to be done by entry-level people. So how are these students going to get started on that first rung if the first rung is now being handled by AI? Are the students thinking about that? I know that's a lot to cover in one question, but there you go.
So I'll start. I'll again, because I'm teaching business school students, not necessarily those pursuing academic training in communications, also undergrads. I Gen Z is bringing a sense of curiosity. They had a significant imprint, as we all did, on their learning and their attitude toward learning from COVID. So many of them were just graduating high school as COVID hit, missed some of those milestones. But they really they bring a sense of curiosity, of challenge, of hopefulness, of entitlement. And so, Shell, I would add to the first rung, your first comment about AI, which I'll make a comment on in a moment, that many of them are, we as parents have elevated them to be high achievers. From the time that they first set up their skate on the ice at a hockey rink, and we were part of a system that inflated the sense of importance of their accomplishment. And I take that on as a parent. I hope I didn't do that too much individually, but I know that generationally I did. And right to the at least in Canada, schools being post-secondary institutions being difficult to get into. So my students needed high 90s to even get into the school that they're in. And I'm now kind of recalibrating and saying 75 is a good mark. And in the real world, you can expect to be operating at kind of that level. And so they have a lot of recalibration to do. And I'm gentle with them. I see them as so ambitious and otherworldly in their entrepreneurial and different thinking, different ways of thinking about the world of business and leadership and all the things they want to do, while at the same time needing to be grounded in, as you say, AI as a building block, the fact that they may not ascend quite as quickly as they have been led to believe, and aren't and may have to work for that in different ways.
For myself, my perspective is a little bit different from Jennifer. She's teaching business students. I'm teaching students who are focused on PR and communications, journalism. I have found, like a year ago, when I asked the question, how many of you have used AI? Maybe a quarter of the class raised their hand. And I asked this past spring, and 3/4 of the students raised their hand. But I also found that they are not very trusting of AI from the students I have. They're being curious, but they're being cautious at the same time. I incorporate AI exercises into the class and as homework assignments. And I've had professors, we talk about AI, and there are like two camps for AI, with some professors saying, let them use it. And if they are creating assignments through AI, they have to deal with that moral issue, their integrity, etc. And then others who are, if I notice that their work has gone from mediocre to really incredible work, I have to question what they're doing. There is not one mindset at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte anyway, on how it should be approached, but I feel I'm obligated to let them know this is a tool that you can use to help you in your careers, but don't rely on it because it hallucinates. It can be racist. It can be negative about gender. It's putting everything in there. So I think their attitude of being cautious about it is a good one, but they recognize it's not going away and they need to harness the power of it.
Yeah, I love the word cautious. I teach students who want to go into the workforce as coaches and consultants. There is a lot of debate in the world of coaching and consulting about what AI can bring, especially in the world of coaching. And there are many companies that are intent on making a lot of money by promising an experience they call coaching for a broad number of people through the use of artificial conversations. What I challenge my students to think, and I'll challenge them this evening, is if this tool or these tools strengthen the foundation or the base, then what must we do to then elevate the counsel that we provide? And my belief is that this experience that AI brings to millions of people is not necessarily coaching by the pure definition, but it is conversation. And it means that if we want to succeed and really make a difference to the people we counsel, we then need to elevate it ourselves. And so I view it very much, John, as you described, it as a challenge. I remind them that 25 years ago, we thought the world was going to change when this thing called the internet was invented. and thank goodness for Shell, because he helped calm us all down at the time. But you know, it's a tool. You know, it's great to be able to ask ChatGPT, what should I worry about as I get older? But, you know, I could Google the same thing, or I could have gone to the library and looked that up in an encyclopedia. Every generation has resources. this is a quick one. It's not a deep one, but it is a way for us to see what else other people are talking about. And that's kind of how I look at it.
And, thinking about it in terms of those young students getting out of university and going for their first job, and there's not a job probably for writing press releases. But what they can have is the ability to know how to use AI and to bring that caution in that everyone's been talking about, because I don't think it's enough anymore to say, hey, I have this skill set. I can write really well. I can do this. You have to have more ability to use all the tools in the toolbox to get the work done.
Yes, absolutely.
And the critical thinking skills, which I know we all prioritize, again, from a communications perspective, but that spreads more broadly, that allows them and us to say, I ask my students, if you're using AI, and I encourage its use in lots of situations. I had a librarian come in last week, did a fabulous session on research, who talked about the most powerful use of AI was as a thinking partner. And I really liked that. I just like that. But if you're using AI, I ask my students, are you willing to put your name on this? Are you willing to take ownership of it? And if so, then that requires putting a fairly critical lens over it to ensure that it meets your standards. I was asking my students yesterday, John, to your point about students being wary. First of all, in the last couple of years, like many post-secondary institutions, mine has kind of wrestled with the tumbleweed of how do we approach this. There was probably a 3-month period where it was 100% forbidden, and then we've kind of learned to integrate. But I'm learning that a lot of students are still very cautious, both about the risk of academic misconduct related to the use of AI. Yes. But then also, I had a student yesterday who volunteered. I asked, we're going to have some fun with using ChatGPT's verbal, like having some AI conversations. And just for thought generation. And a student said, I used it just last week or a couple of weeks ago for interview preparation, and gave some information about the organization I was going to, and asked it to ask me some questions that I might get in an interview. And he said, I thought it was really good practice. But he said, I got my score on the interview. I guess this company was going through a process like that, and it was only 70. So I'm never using it again because it really misled me.
Honestly, he could have gotten 50 without it,
Well, and I think it comes back to something we were certainly taught, whether informally or formally. There are no shortcuts. And we're human. We look for shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. Mm-hmm. And if it elevates the base of knowledge or the base of insight, that means we have to then work harder to elevate what we bring and the value we bring.
Jennifer, you mentioned your example of the student who was leery with the results with AI. I had a student she was a good student. Her work was good. And then one day she turned in an assignment that was absolutely brilliant. I just thought it was wonderful. And I said, this is really great. I enjoyed reading it. Thank you. And she said, I put it through AI to edit it. And I just stood there, okay. I wasn't mad at her because she was taught by me how to use the tool, but none of the other students did that. This was the first student who put her work through AI to edit it, and it actually was really good. So it's a situation where it can help, but I didn't penalize her for it because she messed up. I used AI. And
so we have among the looser definitions of how to use AI. And one of the things I love to do in class are spontaneous presentations where you get a topic and you get 15 minutes and you come back and you deliver 2 or 3 minutes on the topic. And 2 students came back with absolutely the same presentation. So either they were telepathic or they had, and this is a virtual class, so it's easy to multitask. And so I did comment when I gave my observations that these things happen. However, in this case, the burden was on student number 2, who might have wanted to listen carefully when all of a sudden words they planned to say were being articulated by student number 1. And they might have wanted to make an adjustment. And they like, oh, you mean you could tell? I said, yes. So
Which
it's,
interesting because I can't remember her name, but she was Google's first chief decision scientist. And she referred to Gen AI as infinite right answers because you can ask an AI the same question twice and it will give you 2 different, the same information, but presented with different words. But I want to get back to some basics around all of this. And I don't know what would be more basic than this. What's involved in planning and delivering a first-class experience to your students?
Being on. I mean, that's probably the greatest energy lift. And many of us are type A personalities, but there are times when I'm tired. But every day of teaching is a day of performance. Mark, I'm betting that you, with your experience, probably elevate that to a new level. But that combined with showing up as authentically as I want them to show up. So that doesn't mean kind of whining about what kept me up late or about something else going on in my life, but it does mean saying I don't know when I don't know, exploring the answer to something when I need to with them, and then otherwise being prepared. And when I first started, I was full of panic before the first term. And again, this was only 4 or 5 years ago. Because I hadn't been in a structured classroom environment like this, teaching week, a couple times a week after week. And one of my colleagues gave me an excellent piece of information, which was plan ahead, understand your material, but also prepare yourself one class at a time because the landscape will change. And that's one of those situations where I really found that a powerful two-way learning for me as a consultant and as a teacher in the classroom. And so Mark, to your point about the 2 students who both delivered the same information, it's true. There's a certain dynamic within a cohort where some need to be engaged differently than others. And the same is true with clients and with life. And so my ability to adapt both on the fly in the moment in the classroom, but then also, I come out of a Monday class and I go, okay, they really weren't picking up on that concept. Let's spend some more time on Wednesday doing it. I think is a very tailored learning experience.
And to Jennifer's point, I agree that teaching is performative. My first class, I was like Jennifer, a bundle of nerves. Am I going to do this right? How are they going to respond to me? But after that first class, you develop a certain rhythm to how the class works. I literally rev myself up because I'm going to be on my feet for nearly 3 hours teaching them. My class is 1 time a week from 5:30 to 8:15 p.m. And I have to keep my energy high to keep them engaged. And I've never had a student fall asleep because I switch it up all the time to keep their interest. And I think, to Jennifer's point again, being prepared, but also making adjustments. If you see something is not working, then I know I need to go back and cover that again. It's just being flexible in the classroom. You can prepare, and I do that for every class, but sometimes not every class is responsive to something you taught another class. So you make those adjustments.
I kind of, sometimes I feel like I'm a showrunner for a television series, and I plan out the season, but then week to week I make adjustments depending on, how far we advanced the plot. I plan to death, and one of the things that was an adjustment, and I think a healthy adjustment for me, was when I started teaching on Zoom, and I realized that Zoom time is very different than in-person time, and Zoom eats content, and I find I have to plan almost twice the amount of content in the Zoom environment than I did in the live environment, because in the live environment, if you have 5 minutes, you can talk amongst yourself. You do that in the Zoom environment, they go shopping. And so I have to program myself like 9 to 9:05, 9:05 to 9:10, and it's that specific, but that structure gives me the freedom to be spontaneous. It gives me the freedom to be in the moment. And so I find the more structured and planned I am, the more in the moment I can be. And then I carefully say at the end of the class, because like you, John, I teach in 3-hour blocks. And at the end of tonight, I will say, okay, this is how far we got. When I do my Sunday video, because I send the class a video on Sunday to kind of get their thinking for next week, this is what I need to pick up so that we are prepared for the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience is a bit different because, you brought in the face-to-face teaching. Mark just brought up online synchronous education through Zoom. I teach asynchronous online. Mm-hmm. So I do not have a specific time when I am in front of students or they are with me. Mm-hmm. We do it in separate. So it's not energy that I have to bring to it, but it is engagement. So throughout the entire week of the module, I have to be engaging with what people are putting on. There's a discussion board. I put comments in there to move students along to the next idea, and grade papers in that same way so that I can bring each student just a little bit further with everything that they do. And through that process, we build a relationship. And sometimes I have phone calls with them, but not very often. So yeah, it's a very different way of teaching, but it involves the same principle, but maybe not energy, but engagement.
One of the challenges of teaching when you're still working, and Jennifer, I think you're the one panelist here who is still engaged in communications as a profession. Everybody else, am I wrong? Are any of you still working as communicators too?
As a consultant, but not full-time.
Yeah,
okay.
As a coach, yeah.
Yeah, all right. To me, it sounds like burning the candle at both ends. I know that one semester that I did teach, finding the time to prepare classes and grade homework and do all of that while I still had my responsibilities at the office was a challenge. Jennifer, how do you manage that? And you mentioned that you actually get something out of the teaching that you're able to bring back to your job. Can you talk about that too?
Sure. So, I can't say as I manage it with full and long days, and I'm game for that, and I have the energy for it, and I thrive on it. So I could manage it differently. I could take on fewer sections of the courses that I teach. And many of my teaching colleagues do that. They take on 1 or 2 sections and juggle that in with, in some cases, full-time jobs. I'm really, really lucky to have clients, some long-term clients, and then some project clients where I've been able to touch on, or I've been able to kind of create a bit of a schedule. So I'll say to my clients, I'm available Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm available Tuesdays and Thursdays. On the other days, I'm in the classroom and I can't respond. And I'm still able to bring some value to the work that I'm doing there. So from a scheduling perspective, it's challenging. This past year, I did 4 sections of a couple of courses and had some big projects go on, and that was a lot. And my family didn't necessarily see a lot of me, but it was also really invigorating. In terms of what I bring from teaching to my work, it's I think a better understanding of the younger generations, of Gen Z in particular, which is an audience that many of my clients are either that's part of the audience they're reaching, or part of their employee audience, or about to be part of their employee audience. So I'm able to bring some perspective about what how organizations can be ready for communicating to and engaging with Gen Z in a meaningful way. And then, I think some of the examples that I've talked about in terms of reminding myself of the models that work in communications that apply to the classroom, and then fine-tuning those models and bringing them back into my work in strategic storytelling. So, I've been challenged by AI in the classroom and understanding it in ways that allow me to bring AI knowledge to my work, perhaps more quickly than I might have otherwise. I've always been one that's been curious and hungry for new technology, but the real world application of that from the classroom has really helped boosted me from a consulting perspective.
Well, Jennifer is a superwoman, so she can do all of that. But I do know of individuals who had jobs or have jobs who tried teaching, and they taught for one semester and never came back because they felt it was too much with their full-time job. And all that's involved in teaching a course, planning, actual teaching in front of the class, scheduling the grading of papers, putting together quizzes and exams, bringing in guest speakers, asking the right questions. There's a lot involved. And for some people, it's just not for them, but you don't know until you step out there. But you really need to give it serious consideration because it's not a cakewalk.
Yeah, and I do think that the question of how can the teaching experience strengthen my work in whatever I may practice is a critical one, because it helps us solidify our commitment to both. So I find I transitioned several years ago to a focus in my work of coaching. And I find that because I had a transition, I am a better teacher for students who come to our program who are in transition. And I learn from their navigating their transition clues that then help me continue the transition that I'm on myself. And so I find that if it goes back to, I think that all lessons in life we learn from musical comedy. And there's a line in The King and I, from our students we will be taught. And I do believe that what helps me manage the commitment of teaching and what it requires is this belief that I'm learning every week specific needed lessons that help me every time then that I go coach someone.
One of the things that I remember from my days in college is that there were a couple of teachers who I kind of got close to, spent time with a couple of small groups of other students, and they became confidants, could talk to them about things. These days, there is a mental wellness crisis that I think it permeates society, but we've been hearing about it a lot at the student level. How does that affect your teaching? What are you seeing in regards to mental health at the student population?
In my situation, it's mental health is an issue. I've had students who have had challenges. One student in particular came to class very excited. He came to 2 classes and he didn't turn in homework for those 2 classes. And then he wrote me, I have to drop out because I am suffering from so much anxiety. I'm moving back with my parents. And then when COVID was here, I had a student who was on the screen and he was looking down at his hands and his fingers were working and moving. And he did this for about 2 or 3 classes. And then I sent him a note and said, you know, you really shouldn't be texting during class. And he wrote back, Professor, I'm not texting. I am working with, and I don't know what this thing is called, but it's like a whirligig and it spins and spins and spins. And he says, I'm doing that because I'm so anxious about what is happening and I have to do this to stay calm and in control. But it's a real thing, and you need to be observant as a professor when you're teaching to look for those behaviors or tics or little differences in students. And I get letters, at least 1 or 2 per semester, from the university saying this student has some challenge. They don't tell me what it is, but they let me know. It's not the way it used to be prior to COVID, where I didn't get anything. And now I'm getting these notices that students may have a particular issue. It's something I think all of us need to pay attention to. And for people who are interested in teaching, you need to be aware that every student is different and they have different challenges and problems or issues that may not be clear and apparent in the beginning, but you may see something along the way. And just being aware of it, being sensitive to it. That's what I would tell anyone who's interested in teaching.
Yep.
You know, we have this issue a lot. I've been teaching online for Southern New Hampshire for 9 years now, and I have noticed a lot more students with accommodations in this time. Those students with accommodations get the choice to notify me or not. And if they do, that's great. Most of the time, the accommodations are extra time to do assignments. And I find myself reaching out more to those students based on the work that they submit to help them understand and move through the class, because it can be more difficult. I try to, like, if I do videos, I make sure they're closed captions, because some people don't do well with videos. Some people don't do well with reading long blocks of text, so the videos help. But like John said, every student is different, and just trying to look at what every student is doing and figure out how they're succeeding in the class can really go a long way to what solutions that I provide to the students.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I'll just throw this in quickly, we're all students forever and ever. And one of the powerful things I find being in the classroom, to your point, John and Cindy, is a reminder, frankly, in my case, in my experience, at least, this next generation, this younger generation is much more willing to be vulnerable, to be open, to talk about the issues and challenges they're facing, and sure, maybe I'm a confidant, but they're also willing to be open with their classmates in ways that remind me that we all need to share those experiences, those burdens, the kindness that we extend to someone we know and has a stated kind of challenge they're working with. And yeah, I think I hope that I show up with a little more, with a little deeper empathy and kindness as a result of my teaching.
And I hope that I help them experience, in the way the class is structured, the magic of community. I think that competition between people, and I use IABC all the time as my example. A lot of us, we could all compete for the same jobs. We never really talk about it, but we could. But it's such a community of support. And I think how we create a sense of community in our class where people really do feel they can watch out for each other is hopefully a life lesson that isn't in the syllabus, but certainly has a relevance to what they experience later on. So thank you for bringing this up.
Of course. We are out of time. We do have a question from Brian. I'm going to throw it to each of you for a quick one-word answer. Is your teaching about PR and communications part of a business school where it belongs, or part of some sociology, philosophy, artsy department? Cindy, business or other?
Well, it's other. I teach in a graduate level communications program.
Great. Mark?
And I teach in a graduate level executive coaching consulting program in the NYU School of Professional Studies.
Okay. Jennifer?
Business.
Business. And John?
College of Liberal Arts.
There you go. Okay. I do want to thank Anna Willie for coordinating all of this, as always. Also, let everyone know that the next Circle of Fellows will be at the IABC World Conference in Vancouver on Tuesday, June 10th. Episode 117 will be a session. The 5 new fellows, the 2025 class of fellows, will be up on the stage with me. Other fellows will be in the audience. Brad Whitworth will have a microphone and will be roaming the audience, but we will still be broadcasting live. So watch for the announcement, but it's earlier in the month and a different time. So June 10th, watch for that announcement coming up shortly. And thanks everybody for your participation today. Great.
Thanks, Shell. See you all later.
Thanks,
Bye.
Al.
Thank you so much.